Hi, guys. Hi, I'm Lindsay Firestone, and I'm the Film and Special Content Projects Lead at Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I'm delighted to share the stage with Jane Joyner, CEO of Good Energy, and Stephen Markley, author of The Deluge and writer on the hit TV show Paradise. How many of you in the room have had a chance to see Paradise? Maybe a clap of. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to jump into that a little bit more soon. I personally just finished binging the show. I'm in an interesting state. Maybe we'll talk to some of you after this program. But it's a gripping socio-political thriller for those of you who are uninitiated. And it's really exploring tipping points for our planet, tipping points for our society, and tipping points for us as individuals. And I was curious if maybe both of you could share kind of what was your tipping point for getting into the climate crisis, and where does storytelling fit into the climate crisis?
Please.
My tipping point was probably the beginning was a documentary I saw in college on mountaintop removal coal mining. I grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Gulf Coast of Alabama, and the idea of my mountains being blown up was just viscerally unpalatable for me. And I basically have done nothing ever since then. But the way that I got into storytelling, humans have been telling stories for over 50,000 years. It's literally what kept us alive and keeps us alive. We are meaning-making machines, and having worked in the climate movement my whole career, I just kind of could feel that we were missing these riveting stories that help us respond to this emotionally, that grip us, that help us provide meaning and purpose. And I had the opportunity. My dad is an evangelical megachurch pastor, which is another set of stories, religion. And I was in a show called Madam Secretary on CBS. It's a TV procedural. They had a storyline that was inspired by me and my dad, where I tried to convince, or the character tried to convince her evangelical father climate change was real. And through that experience was like, can you tell me, to Alex Maggio, who's the writer on that episode, why we're not seeing more of this on screen, what we can do to change it, and will you introduce me to all of your screenwriter friends so I can get them on the phone? And shortly thereafter, I found Lindsay, and Bloomberg Philanthropies came on as our first partner. So huge thank you.
Oh, we're thrilled to be a supporter. Thank you.
I was always sort of a politically motivated young person, and in college, my attention just kept coming back to what I thought was clearly like the biggest problem humanity has ever faced. I also wanted to be a writer, and I think sort of melding those interests, like writers are often just working on what preoccupies them. And so I really started thinking about this novel, The Deluge, around like 2007, 2008. Started it in 2010, and it took me 12 years to complete it. And now it's all coming true, so it was
prophecy.
Yeah, it was a time well spent. And then Dan Fogelman, he had hired me for Only Murders in the Building as my first TV job. He read it, brought me onto Paradise. He was kind of like, Markley, we need a disaster. I was like, I've got a bunch.
And to that point, we talk a lot about, in the climate crisis, about facts and figures when we're communicating on the topic. But why storytelling?
You go first this time.
Yeah, unfortunately, encounters with reality don't seem to be working or pushing the needle very far. And I think everything Anna said about the power of storytelling. We need those narratives that sort of make clear, and this was something I spent many years thinking about with my novel. It's not enough to sort of show people what's going to happen. They have to feel emotionally what the stakes of this moment in history really are. And so getting people to feel those stakes through character work, through the encounter with human beings that feel real, I feel like is a more powerful way of focusing one's attention on the problem at hand.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We work with a story scientist named Dr. Angus Fletcher. He's one of our advisors, and he studies how different story structures evoke different emotions. He calls them literary technologies, but talks a lot about TV and film within that. And he says that there's a mythology that storytelling is the best form of communications, but it's actually the only form of communications. Because if you don't convey information through a story, people either block it out completely, which is why facts and oftentimes PowerPoint presentations and other forms of communications do get blocked out, or they attach it to a story that they already have. And that is why we can, in this country, look at the same facts, come up with very different conclusions, and also it's why I do think that conveying stories are so imperative, not just to climate, but any social change or social movement, because it goes, again, back to our evolution. Like, the way that we survived was through telling stories, and the better the story, the more memorable the story, the more likely that community was to pass it on and survive. And so I do think it's in our DNA. So yeah, it's critical. And TV and film is the most powerful storytelling engine in the world today. Over 700 million people are subscribed to Netflix alone, and most in this country, the average amount of hours that people spend watching TV and film is over 3 hours a day. So it just reaches a great deal of people in the most persuasive means possible.
Talking about reaching a great deal of people, Stephen, on Paradise, I think you guys reached 7 million viewers in just the first week alone. Tell us a little bit about that show and the audience reaction to it and the process of working in the Hollywood system to make that a reality.
Yeah, you're making me feel very great about my work
you
here. So it was weird because the idea was really out there when we started. Then the strikes happened. So we all left our jobs for 6 or 3 months, right? And then came back, and we were all kind of oh my God, what is this? And you have no idea how people are going to react to anything. You have no clue how people are going to accept or not accept the narrative you've built. And so the fact that it came out and was a hit was not surprising, but more just oh really? Okay, cool. And so from that perspective, it's kind of you're just grateful to be on a show that's working and that's successful and that's getting renewed. We're all just trying to sort of hustle our careers forward, as everyone else is. But then, I look at it as, I did my little piece of it. I got this slice of climate change into the show in a way that, it's big, but also, in my opinion, sort of points to what these tipping points mean. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but it's not just oh, this disaster happens. It's, oh, this disaster causes the next disaster and the disaster after that, as the dominoes begin to fall and the system begins to unwind. And I think that's why particularly episode 7 is just a banger. It's just so intense and cool and fun and scary, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful piece of television.
That's a great cue. I think we want to run a poll about what we are hoping to see in climate change and climate storytelling. So if you use the QR code above, what type of fictional portrayal of climate change is most effective in driving public action? So this is an audience poll for all of you. What about urgent and alarming depictions, hopeful and solutions-oriented, or character-driven narratives with subtle climate themes? So we'll give everyone a chance to answer that question, but I know you two have a bunch on this topic.
Talk all night about this one.
Jane, why don't we start with you? And as whoever can put the poll answers up as they come up, that'd be great.
I would say, there's definitely certain climate themes and topics we need a lot more of. Mental health and climate, I think, is a really big one because that's kind of a crisis within a crisis. The rates, especially amongst young people, are astronomical. And one of the big, most powerful things that stories do is help us process difficult emotions and help us feel less alone and feel seen. And they call that in psychology a psychological safety net. And you have to have that before you can move into a place of any kind of agency or action. I would say climate displacement, which is definitely a part of Paradise, and climate migration, and then beyond petrochemicals and plastics, and just given how the villain, for lack of a better word, why all this is happening, the fossil fuel industry. But also, I think even more important than that question is how we need stories that evoke different emotions. You know, if you think about your favorite film or a film that really changed your life or television show, you probably don't remember the exact story beats or the name of every single character. What you remember is how it made you feel. And so I think that we really have to look at what are the stories that help us process grief, that help us find a sense of courage, even with overwhelming odds, that help us really remember how beautiful and a gift this planet is, and the opportunity to be here together, that sense of love, which I also think Paradise does really well. So yeah, that's...
Yeah, so The Deluge particularly is definitely an urgent and alarming depiction. So for the 15% of you willing to buy it, I appreciate that. I think it's unavoidable, though, that you know, what this thing is urgent and alarming. There is no way around it, right? I wrote a chapter in that book about Los Angeles burning down in 2018. The book came out in 2023, and then this January, I got to watch from my balcony as the literal part of the city I said was going to catch fire, caught fire, in the exact way that I'd sort of written it into the novel, right? So this is not any type of clairvoyance on my part. I am just following what the science is telling us is going to happen, right? So to me, alerting people to the fact that, for instance, the insurance industry is in a ton of trouble is important. Like, if we're not explaining that to people through narrative, what are we doing? Having said all that, I also think there are definitely not enough stories about the energy transition and the revolution that's happening in clean energy. You know, what I find when I talk to people is they're aware really bad shit's happening. What they're not aware of is that we have all the technology we need to solve 60 to 80% of the problem right now. We know every policy we need to implement. We just can't because of the political economy of it, because of the power of the fossil fuel lobby. So to me, like, making that part of the story come to life, the comeback story. Like, we are down by, I was just watching NBA Summer League, we're down like 35 points in the fourth quarter. And we need to start like really jacking threes to get back in the game. This analogy is gonna get out of control if I don't stop, so.
Could I add something on to that?
Of course.
I think it also, that's kind of like, it connects back to why stories are so important, because we do have all the science and the technology and policy. What we don't have is a sense of collective courage. And what gives humans courage is the stories, whether or not that's the story of your family, the religion that you grew up or you subscribe to, or television and film is a really big one, because that is the most pervasive form of storytelling. So it all circles back.
Stephen, you mentioned the fossil fuel industry. They've long played a role in culture-shaping narratives. What have you, both of you, really taken from their playbook?
Have unlimited money. Simple.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, that industry has had an enormous head start in shaping the public consciousness, you know, over a century, right? Again, as the power of the fossil fuel industry wanes, which eventually it will, because, you know, solar and batteries and all the rest are going to come after it and begin eating into it. Hopefully, the power of these other industries will help us tell some of these other stories, right? But again, it's an uphill climb. And, you know, look, I just went to see F1 in IMAX, which was awesome, but also is about, like, fossil fuel powered cars, and Aramco is all over that movie. Right? Like, it's a major sponsor. So you get the ways in which this industry has sort of like subtly shaped our minds over everybody's lifetime here. And so that is what I guess both of us are trying to do, is find ways to chip away at that storytelling power.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, unfortunately, they have been extraordinarily brilliant at storytelling and investing in culture change. I mean, they were investing in Hollywood from the inception of Hollywood. They funded a Oscar-nominated film in the 40s, might have been, yeah, 1940s or 50s. They still spend an enormous amount in Hollywood, and it is specifically to shape everything from car companies, who not only place their products in TV and film, they consult on the stories and how they're depicted. Landman, some of y'all might have seen, I mean, glorifies the fossil fuel industry. Also, there's some folks connected to that who invest in anti-renewable policy. So, like, they've been spending so much money in the stories to create the sense of identity of fossil fuels being about freedom, about masculinity, about living the good life. And that was incredibly intentional from the very beginning, continues to be. I mean, Saudi Arabia just opened one of the biggest film funds in the world, 70% of which is funded by fossil fuels. So I mean, I think it's just the oil and gas industry spends $750 million a year on climate communications, way more than the climate movement spends. And they also, like, one of the screenwriters we work closely with is Dorothy Fortenberry, who wrote on *Handmaid's Tale* and was on Extrapolations with Scott Burns. And last year at the panel, she was on the panel here last year, and she had this great quote that was, it's not that we haven't been telling climate stories, or it's not that there hasn't been climate stories in TV and film, it's that the wrong side is the one telling them and has been telling them. Brilliant playbook.
That's a great Dorothy quote.
Yeah.
Anna Jane, maybe we can sort of zoom out. Tell us a little bit about how good energy works in Hollywood.
Yeah, so we kind of have like three sort of strategic areas. One, we do a lot of narrative research. So we work with academic partners. USC is our primary partner. We looked at all of the scripts that aired in the US market between 2016 and 2020 when we first got it started, to see over 37,000 scripts. To see which ones even mentioned climate change, let alone told stories about it. Just the mentions. And this isn't just the word climate change, it's like every variation of dialogue that you could use to talk about this. That was 2.8%. The actual stories were a lot lower, and we're redoing this study, partially thanks to the Walton Family Foundation, and of course Bloomberg, our friend from the Walton Family Foundation, is here, so thank you. We're doing that now to see how it's gone up, but we're also doing the first ever narrative analysis of TV and film, so not just looking at the frequency, but the stories themselves, and what kinds of emotions are they evoking. Are they predominantly apocalypse stories, which I think we can safely say is true. The other tropes we see a lot of are eco-terrorism and shaming and guilting people over their plastic straws, over their SUVs, which is not the best emotion that you want to evoke because it shuts people down. And then where we need to go. And we also look at stories around particular issues. We're doing a big one on health and climate right now. We're doing one on climate migration. And then the other areas that we work, so we do a lot of research. Then we develop tools and services and programs for them, and we also co-create them with screenwriters and creative executives. And I built my team from people who have a great understanding of climate and that landscape, but also have a really in-depth understanding of this art form and this form of storytelling and the business needs of the industry, because at the end of the day, this is a business. So then we build things. We have a playbook for screenwriting in the age of climate change. We have all kinds of kind of public open source tools, but it's also how we build the whole organization. So how we do our consulting on TV and film projects, how we talk about this with creatives in the industry and business people in the industry. I would say a lot of our success is based on our research and then applying that to the actual work that we do.
Can I just interject quickly, just to say that, like, isn't it crazy that, like, you have to form this organization to point out that nobody's talking about reality?
Yes. Yeah.
That, like, it's 2.8% of film and TV is talking about the biggest thing to happen in the history of humankind.
Yeah.
Like, it is wild, and it just, like, shows the power of what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of that is the way that we talk about it. I mean, screenwriters, as you well know, are inspired by the world around them. And if they're hearing most climate information being kind of dry, boring facts, or really confusing, then it's less likely to inspire a story. So translating climate to creatives is a big part too.
And to jump in on that, Anna Jane, because I know we're running low on time, but we've made some progress. Mm-hmm. Thanks in large part to shows like Paradise.
Yes.
But if we look 5 years out, what would you both hope to see? What would you hope to see in pop culture, and how would you hope that would shape the larger conversation?
Well, obviously, The Deluge as a 15-part, Netflix series. Obvious.
They do care about climate.
Yeah. And then I think like a variety, like I would love to see a show that is excited about our energy future, that is excited about all of these solutions that people do not know enough about right now.
Yeah, I would like to see a lot more diversity of climate narratives and a lot more genre diversity as well. We're starting to see that. When we first started, it was a lot of superhero films, the rare occasions that showed up, and then a lot of kind of like, Day After Tomorrow type of films. But now we're seeing the latter half of our research. It's really diversified genre-wise. So I would love to see some more rom-coms. But I also think it really goes back to that emotional experience. So it's not just the topics that we're talking about, but it's like really being intentional about the kinds of stories that we're supporting and making, and how they make people feel, and how do we give people a sense of courage and help them wrestle with this really overwhelming human experience that we are. Part of the big problem is we're just not talking about it enough. Part of the problem is we're not telling stories that evoke that enough.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you both so much for being
Thank you.
here. Thank you all for joining us.